There Will Be Blood demands your attention. Not because of the acting, not because of the story, but because of the sound. The dread in every silence.
I'm gonna bury you underground.
You haven't really heard There Will Be Blood until now. Paul Thomas Anderson is more than a contemporary film director. He's hailed as one of the greatest to ever make movies. We use cool words like auteur to describe his involvement in the movies he puts his name on. And when I learned about Anderson's approach to a film's sound, I knew I had to do an episode about the technical and artistic aspects of the sound of my favorite film of his, the 2007 masterpiece, There Will Be Blood. To me, the sound of a movie leaves a more permanent impression on my mind, purely due to my love of audio and recording. So it makes sense that when I fell in love with There Will Be Blood, sound played a huge role in the affair. I noticed that certain portions of There Will Be Blood were outrageously loud, although I certainly did not feel like leaving the movie early. But this is a huge point I want to touch on, so let's get to that first. It has to do with the dynamics of the film's soundtrack. The term dynamics generally refers to the dynamic range of a piece of audio or a piece of music or recorded sound. Many films try to make the sound level throughout their length. Basically, for most viewers, it's better to have a small dynamic range where the level or volume of the audio remains fairly constant. This approach is well-intentioned, and it is the industry standard because most people do not want to be messing with the volume control throughout the movie-watching experience. It can be said that to have a blockbuster hit, the sound of the movie should have a fairly compressed dynamic range. So sound supervisors tend to do just that, and whether it's manually or via limiters and compression plugins and hardware devices, they compress the audio so that a whisper is literally as loud as an explosion and vice versa. But if you ask me, an explosion should be something that knocks the viewer off their recliner. Paul Thomas Anderson understands that, and he uses loudness and silence to great effect in There Will Be Blood, a movie where the sound of wind blowing over a desert plain is as deafeningly meaningful as an actually deafening explosion. Paul Thomas Anderson wants you to feel like it's too loud. He wants you to be emotionally and internally involved in the struggle you see in the movie. So he goes against the grain and ensures that the sound holds the same dose of reality that the imagery does. The on-location sound of the film was captured by none other than David M. Roberts, highly skilled boom mic operator and recordist. David's work can also be heard in the brand new Paul Thomas Anderson film, One Battle After Another. Sound design is credited to Chris Scarabozio on There Will Be Blood. His work is what brings the recorded sound to life. He literally designs the final audio you hear in the film. Just listen to the wind in the beginning of the film, where we see Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, camping out for the night as he prospects for silver in the days before he breaks into the oil tycoon game. The sound of the wind is layered and thick. What does the wind evoke for an audience member? That's the type of question that the director has to ask. In this case, it would be solitude, hearkening back to the archetypal idea of barren wastelands with nothing but tumbleweeds blowing around. It represents a storm, something unsettling, something building. Essentially, the wind is personified through Daniel's lonely pursuit to create a storm of his own. The storm is coming, whether he likes it or not, and I think he does like it. Daniel is just like the wind, brooding, destructive, and unpredictable. Therefore, the wind needs to be mixed in such a way that we do not only hear it, but we feel it. Try recording outdoor audio on a windy day. You'll get that big, overdriven slapping and thumping effect as soon as the swirling air hits the microphone, unless you have the proper equipment and the proper knowledge. I would not be surprised if the tone of the wind were made in post-production, taking the recordings and layering, compressing and EQing them into the perfect emotional atmosphere for this scene, and the wind that I'm referring to is only occurring for about 5 seconds. but it matters as much as any other sound in the movie. Anderson is known to be directly involved in the sound recordings of his films, and I can't overstate just how much of the final product we see on screen is actually thought out during production. Chris Scarabozio was the one capturing these sounds in real time or creating them in post. This is perhaps why he was chosen by Anderson to record the sound for There Will Be Blood.
That's about a 12,000 acre parcel.
Did you decide on what you were
I can hear you.
This is your place.
Wasn't it the roast
I
quail?
can hear you. Enjoy your lunch, Daniel. We'll try to enjoy ours.
I beg pardon?
I said enjoy your lunch, and we'll try to enjoy ours.
Well, why don't you try and enjoy it elsewhere?
In There Will Be Blood, they focused on making the environments into characters, like the wind, the sound of the metal on metal in the machinery, the sound of wood thumping and metal thumping against wood, pipes screaming, the character's breath, the rustling of the clothes, like I mentioned. It's all designed and mixed by Scarabozio and his team to put you there. And There Will Be Blood does as well or better than any film many people have ever seen. There Will Be Blood features an original orchestral score composed by Jonny Greenwood. Jonny is a multi-instrumentalist, and many of you may know his work with the band Radiohead. Nominated for a Grammy in the category Best Score Soundtrack Album for a Motion Picture, the soundtrack you hear in the film utilizes some material that Greenwood did not compose himself, such as Violin Concerto in D by Johann Brahms. And that Violin Concerto in D, which is featured, being an unoriginal track in the movie, is from 1878, so the characters in the movie might have actually heard that. The soundtrack begins with the track known as Open Spaces, appropriately titled with its stark call-and-response theme played on strings. We hear the low strings call out with an interval of a fifth, powerful and sturdy, like an oil derrick. This is the interval that people sometimes refer to as power chords. Then the answer comes with a sweeter response, not in fifths, but in thirds. Greenwood showcases his ability to transform a theme while keeping its core characteristics intact, creating a memorable and moving basis for the film's soundtrack. Open Spaces is pensive, like Plainview lying on the floor of his silver refinery after breaking his leg at the beginning of the movie. I read that Jonny Greenwood actually titled these tracks and composed them while looking at the uncut scenes. So it's like a very personal mixture of the film and the music in this case. Whenever a film composer does that, it shows a lot of respect for the job, and it's custom tailoring the music to the film that the audience will see. But the next track on the soundtrack that I want to talk about is called Future Markets. The introduction is one of the best pieces of film music I've ever heard. It reminds me of the rambunctious and otherworldly strings from The Wizard of Oz. It begins with fast-paced eighth notes on cellos that come to grinding halts all at once, introducing moments of silence that catch the viewer's ear even more than the melody itself. The track with the title There Will Be Blood is a dissonant dive into the mind of Daniel Plainview, in my opinion. Greenwood uses the strings to create machine-like tones, again diving into dissonance until we sometimes hear the orchestra rise to one unison note in a moment of clarity, only to dive down again into an alcoholic rage of distorted and reverberating anarchy. If Daniel Plainview were a piece of music, he would sound like this. And I believe that unison piece I was talking about is the first sound you hear. And on headphones, it's extremely loud. It's at the top of the dynamic range that the movie can, give you without distorting everything and blowing you away, literally. And I would imagine, I didn't see it in the movie, I didn't see this in theaters, but it's actually a scary tone. Some music is scary, like I remember the first time I heard the White Stripes. It's on their album White Blood Cells, and I forget the exact name of it, but I was listening to it when I was young in my dark bedroom, and I was literally scared by it. And it does sound very industrial, and Greenwood captures the same vibe, although through extremely different tones than the White Stripes. And he produces a tone that's horrifying for some reason. It's the fact that they're playing in unison, but it's slightly out of tune. It's very natural. Maybe it's just against the landscape that we see it play on top of, which is just the barren desert. There's something concerning about it, and he captured it in spades. The next track would be Proven Lands. It's a perfect accompaniment to any heart-pumping scene in cinema, and it shines in There Will Be Blood because the visuals are so fantastic. The percussion actually shines here. Images of Edgard Varese pop into mind when I hear it. If you go back and listen to the first episode of this podcast, we talked about Frank Zappa, Varese being one of his primary influences. You can hear the room the track was recorded in, which I love. It has a boxy, almost industrial echo, almost as if it could have been recorded in one of the small buildings newly constructed on Plainview's oil land. Or maybe in the church, where he's brought to his knees to face the absence of his beloved son that he sent away. The most famous scene from the film features a percussion piece with staggered, stuttering rhythms played on small drums, wood blocks, and other percussive elements that are, unnamed to me anyway, because I've never seen a video of the recording process or anything like that. This piece is actually from Greenwood's 2003 album Convergence. Actually, I think the album is not called Convergence. The track is called Convergence from 2003, which really deserves its own New Media Review Weekly episode because it's so good. To me, it sounds like the track was remixed or re-recorded for this film. I believe that it was re-recorded and it's not the original version, and it wasn't simply remixed, but I couldn't find any solid evidence of this online other than my own ears. It's also a Convergence that I'm talking about now is not featured on the official There Will Be Blood soundtrack. I don't know if that's because some contractual reasons. Like I said, it was only released on its own album from Greenwood 4 years prior, so maybe he could not really re-release it. But I'm glad it's in the movie because it's one of the most interesting pieces of music that a lot of people have ever heard. So this piece of music is played throughout the impeccable set piece that makes you go to the edge of your seat, and the music wonderfully imitates your rising heart rate as the adrenaline can be felt. Tornadoes of violins begin to rise as they're getting the fire under control, and then they stop. Now cellos enter with low, dark chords that whisper and poke at the listener, letting you know the fire is here to stay when he realizes that Henry will not be okay. No, not okay at all, in fact. Greenwood didn't just orchestrate the musicians, he orchestrated the viewer's heart and mind too. It's a masterpiece of film scoring that is not to be missed. Greenwood states that Paul Thomas Anderson literally took some of the music and cut the scenes directly from it, meaning the edits match the timing and pacing of the music itself. To me, this indicates Anderson's awareness of the power of the score, ensuring that in no way will the music be an afterthought, but rather the very foundation the film will sit on. Greenwood also says he watched footage of the landscape seen in the first 6 minutes of the film, where there is no dialogue. So now we're going back to the beginning of the film. And based on the music and what he saw, this is where we hear open spaces like I mentioned earlier. It's always fascinating how composers choose to compose their pieces based on the visuals they see. It's always better than music being chosen afterward, in my opinion. Greenwood wanted a primal, out-of-control sound to the music, and he states that for pieces featuring percussion, he sat on the studio floor dubbing one drum at a time, almost like a toddler hitting his toys. This comes across in the music. You can feel the childlike chaos embedded in the tracks. I adore this score, and I can't wait to dive even deeper into it the next time I sit down and watch the film.